If you look at the code in the background, it has created a calculator for us. So public class calculator is the JFrame, extends the JFrame from the Swing library. Now you need to remember that we should not be changing this call. This is a built-in call to initialize the components on our JFrame form. This method is called from within the constructor to initialize the form. Warning: do not modify this code. The content of this method is always regenerated by the form editor. What we are interested in is, if we look at these variables, now we did all of these through a click and drag and drop. We did not add any of these variables directly to this code, so these have been created for us by this IDE. What we want to do now is we want to add some functionality to our buttons. For example, if I click on this button 1, it takes me to the code in the background and it creates a method btn1 action performed. This method tells us that what action should be performed when we click on button 1 or any of the buttons. In this case we clicked on button 1, and this tells us what action should perform, and it will allow us to add functionality to this button. So what we want to do is we want that when we click on button 1, 1 should be displayed on this on our display area, and we can do that by calling the setter methods. For example, the name of our text area or the display area was txt display, and we can call these methods on that area. So for example, we want to set the text in our text area. So it has a set text method, and if you remember, we use the setters and getters methods. So now what we want this action to do is to get whatever the text on the button is. So the buttons also have the setter and getter methods. btn1 dot, if you press dot, you will see what methods you can call on this button object. I will choose the get text. So what should happen now is, when I click on btn1 or button 1, it should call the set text method of the txt display, that is the display area, an object of the text field at the top of our form, and set the text in that area to whatever the text on the button is. Now the text on button 1 is 1, so it should set the text of button 1, the text display to 1. You can also write simply by setting the text to maybe 1, but we will be copying and pasting this code for all of our buttons, so it is better to get the text of the button instead of hard coding the text that we want to display in the txt display object. So now run our program again, and let's see what happens when we click on btn 1. If I click on 1, you can see that a 1 is displayed. But if I click on 1 again, nothing happens. It should be 11, 111 or 111. And again, if I click on the other buttons, nothing happens over here. Since we have not added any functionality to the other buttons. But importantly, even on button 1, if I click on the button again, I want a 1 to be maybe concatenated to the one that is already there, and similarly if I press 2 twice, I should get a 22 rather than a 2 over here. So what we need to do is we need to read the text that is already there on in the txt display and concatenate to that the text of the button that we are pressing on. That will help us to maybe work our calculator better than what it is currently now. And similarly, if I, let's say I want to add text from the keyboard, I can add anything to this display area. What ideally should this txt display field should be doing is, this text field should be doing is, it should not be allowing any text to be added to it other than that is there on the screen. So we'll see how we can control this, that one, we do not allow the any extra text to be displayed on the screen from the keyboard, and also it should, let's say, display what or concatenate to the text that is already there on the screen. And later on we'll move towards adding functionality to the operations buttons. We'll also add functionality to the clear button. So now what we can do is we need to modify this a little bit. What we want is that we should get the text that is already there in the txt display. So we can call the get text method. It will get the text, whatever the text over there was, and it will concatenate the new text that we have clicked on. It will concatenate the text of the button that we have clicked on. So if I run this program again, what should happen is, now if I click on 1, it has displayed a 1 to me in this area. If I click on 1 again, what it is doing is, now it is getting the text that is already there in this area, and it is concatenating the text of the button that I am clicking on after this. Now of course we have not added this functionality to the other other buttons, but we can copy this code and add this to the other buttons as well. Similarly, let's modify the code for the clear button. So when I click on the clear button, what should happen is, you can see that a method is created for us. What should happen is, I can copy this code, and whatever there is on the txt display, it should be an empty string. We'll add functionality to some of the other buttons and try to run our code again. So we need to click on the buttons one by one. I have clicked on btn 2. I will get the text from the btn 2, and concatenate that text to the other buttons. Sorry, the already text that is there. Similarly, we'll do this for all of our buttons. And make sure you change the name of the button, otherwise you will be getting a different text. Since this is not a compilation error, this is might be a logical error, that if you click on 3 and you get a 2 there, that will be a logical error. The compiler will not alert you to that error. We have added functionality for all of our buttons, or specifically the buttons that are supposed to display something on the text area. In the text area, so we have btn4. When we click button 4, it should display or concatenate a 4 to whatever there is in the txt display, 5 for 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, and the dot operator as well. If you look at, if we run the code again now, if we run the application again now, what we can see now is we are able to concatenate whatever we click on to whatever there is in the text field already. So we can be sure that we are able to achieve at least something from this calculator, and then we can clear all of whatever the content we have added to our txt or our text field. But still we are not able to do anything with these numbers. What we want now is, when for example I have this number in this text field, I click on this plus, this one should disappear and I should be able to add another number, and when I click on the equals button, those two numbers should be added together and the answer should be displayed on the screen. For that purpose, what we will do is we will add a few variables to our program in the background, and these should be variables that are accessible to all of these buttons or the methods of these buttons. So we will display the variables on the top of our class. If you want to remove, so I will add a variable double. Now what the double variable should do, first number that should store the first number from my text field. So when I click on any of the operations, for example on the plus, what should happen is that whatever the number I have on the txt in the txt display text field should be stored in this variable, and I can initialize it to maybe 0.0. Similarly, I will have another variable double second number. Now you may be able to do this without declaring these variables, but it is a good idea to go step by step. Initialize to 0. Then you want to have a variable for the result, whether it is a sum or a subtraction or any other operation. Now what we want to know, the operation that we have chosen. For example, if I'm clicking on the equals button, I would want to store the information of the operation that was chosen previous to choosing the second number. So if I, let's say, click on an operation, I want to store that in a variable that will allow me to know what operation I have chosen, and based on the operation that I have chosen, maybe using an if statement or if else statement or a switch statement, I would be able to perform that operation. Now that I have these variables and I have added some form of functionality to our buttons, we are ready to add functionality to our operation buttons. For example, if I click on the plus button, button action performed method will be created. And what I want to do is when I click on the plus button, what should happen is that whatever the number is there is in the txt display text field should be stored in my variable, so that I'm able to perform the operation on this variable is equal to, and one thing that we need to remember is that, as I mentioned previously, that whatever the we enter in our text field, let's say in graphical user programming, that is in the form of text or string. So we would want to convert that to a double value, a number format, so that we are able to perform calculation on that number. If you look at this code, again this is a simple code that what it does is it reads whatever there is in the txt display text field through the by calling the getText method of that text field. It converts it to a double format since we have declared this variable as double, and since we want to perform calculations on this number, we suppose that we assume that this is a valid number, then that is converted, and but that will be in the text format, that will be converted to a double and then assigned to this number. The next thing that we want is, since we would want to empty the text field for our next number, we are building a very simple calculator. We can do that by assigning or by setting the text of the txt display text field to empty string. And the third thing that we want that should happen is our operation variable should be updated with the kind of operation that we have chosen. So this was a string and we have clicked on the plus button. The operation variable or the string operation should be equalized to the plus. Similarly, we will add this code for the rest of the buttons as well. So we have added functionality for our other buttons as well. When we click on a minus button, what should happen is the number already in the text field should be stored in a number in a variable. It should become empty and the operation variable should be updated. So if we run the program again, although we won't be able to perform the calculation still. But if we want to see, if I click on the plus button, it is now ready to accept a new number. Now what I want is when I click on the equals button, although it is not doing anything, if I make it a little simple, if I have clicked on 2, I have clicked on plus, I have clicked on 2 again, I want the answer to be displayed here as 4, but since I have not added any code to the equals button, it will not do anything thus far. Similarly, this button is also not working. What I want this button to do is that when I click on this button, the symbol of this number should change. So for example, if this is a plus 2, if I click on this, this should become a minus 2. This is a minus 2, if I click on this, this should become a positive number. And that is simply can be achieved by multiplying this number by minus 1. So minus 2 multiplied by minus 1 will become 2, and a 2 multiplied by minus 1 will become minus 2. So let's try to add functionality to our these final two buttons. So if I double click on this button, it will take me to the background code for this button, and that is the action that should be performed on this button. So what we can do is we want to read the number that is already there in the text field and store it in a variable, and then multiply that variable by minus 1 and display the result again within the same text field. So we would want to double dot parse double. It will convert the text to the text to the double, and we want to read the value of the string. So we use the value of method dot get text. So it will read the text from the text field and store it in this variable. Now what we will simply do is we multiply this variable by plus minus is equal to plus minus multiplied by minus 1. This should change the symbol or the sign of this number. And now we will want to display this number in our txt display text field in a text format, of course. Set text. So if you want to display a number in a text format in our text field, we need to convert that into a text field, and we can do that by using the value of method of the string. And now the plus minus variable will be converted to a text format, a string format, and it will be displayed on the screen or in the text field area. And finally, we want that when we click on the equals button, what should happen is that the number that there was already and the operation that was chosen or selected, the operation that was selected should be performed on the first number, and the number that we entered after the operation by clicking the equals button. To add functionality to our equals button, if we double click on this, we go to the btn equal action performed method. Now what we want is we want to display the answer. We will declare a variable for our answer. Once we have the answer, we will store that answer in a string variable and display it on this screen or our display area. We also had a variable for storing the value of the second number. So what we want that when we click on the equals button, the second number, the text in the text field should be read and stored in the second number. Again, this will work similar to what we did for the first number. When we click on the operations button, whatever the operation was, the first number, the text in the text field area was stored in the first number. Now when we click on the equals button, the text in the text field area should be stored in the second number variable. So we can simply copy and paste this code, since this will only be after we have chosen or clicked on the operation any of the operation button, and the text field would have become empty and we would have entered another number. We assume that we are entering valid numbers. We are not trying to add maybe with empty strings. In that case, we we are not performing too much validation in our calculator. We are trying to build a very simple calculator. Now the third thing that should happen is, based on the operation that we had clicked on, the relevant operation should perform. So we can use a switch statement over here, or we can use an if statement over here. So if the operation we had clicked on was maybe a plus, and this is why we had an operation variable, a string variable operation, so that we can perform the selection or the switch operation or the if operation on that variable. So if we had chosen the plus operation, what should happen is that the result should be the sum of the two numbers. And the answer should be displayed in the text field. But first we need to convert the result variable to a string format. We use the string dot called the format method of the string class so that we can add some format to our number before displaying it in the string format. We want to maybe add 2 precision points to our result. Since this was a double variable, and we can add the precision points. And finally, the txt display text field should display the answer. Answer will be displayed in the txt display text field. Let's try and check by running this program again. So we have enter a number, and when we click on this operation, the first number should have been stored in the first number variable, and when we add another number and when we click on the equals button, what should happen is this 6 should be stored in this variable, and since we have clicked on the plus button, what should happen is it should be added to our previous number, that was I think 34, and the answer should be displayed on the screen with 2 precision points. As we can see, the answer has been displayed on the screen with 2 precision points as we have chosen over here. We'll do the same for the rest of the operations, for example the minus, the division, and the multiplication operation. So we'll add if statements over here. One for, I will copy and paste this code. This one for the subtraction, this one for maybe the division, and this one for the multiplication. You can add more operations to the calculator, maybe a modulus operator if you may, but so far we have added the operations for our buttons that we had on our calculator. Now if we run the program again, we should be able to maybe perform the rest of the operations as well. So I have chosen, this is my first number, I have chosen the operation as multiplication. If I click on, if I will choose another number, 7 into 3 should be 21. So our buttons are performing accurately. I can change the symbol of this number by clicking on the plus minus button as well. That was the functionality of the plus minus button. You can check the rest of your buttons. For example, if I divide it on 3, I click on the equals button, I get the same answer. So hopefully if I choose maybe minus and 6, so all of our buttons are performing accurately. Now one thing that we didn't change was we are still able to maybe add anything from the keyboard over here. So what we can do with this is we can go to the properties of this text field, and if we can see that there is an editable option over here. If we uncheck this option, then maybe we won't be able to add anything to the screen, this text field, from the keyboard. Now if I try to add things from the keyboard, I'm not able to do this. I can only add things from the buttons of the calculator. This might be a very simplistic way of solving this problem. There would be other methods of solving this problem, maybe using regular expressions that we'll be studying when we study strings or string operations. But for the moment, we have some sort of solution for the problem that we were having. Now this will conclude this part of the lecture as well as this lecture 21. We'll continue our discussion of graphical user interfaces in lecture 22 as well.